And we're off. I feel like we should have had theme music or something.
Yeah.
We'll give it some time for people to join. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Hi, everyone. Hello. Oh, the chat is already
Wow,
popping off.
thanks.
Hi,
It's
everyone.
like Twitch chat in here.
Ding, 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 ding.
Wow, this is a lot of people. Hello. This is
Great.
incredible.
Exciting time.
Some people
Great
have
to see.
discovered the Q&A already, so this is great. This is fantastic. Wow. So hello from the UK, from me. So as you can probably guess from my accent, feel free to share where you're based and say hi in the chat if you haven't already. We've got Amsterdam, Argentina, Berlin, Wales, Canada. Oh, hey, some people know me. Hi. Mexico, Belgium, Montreal, California, Stockholm, Philippines, South Africa, Portugal, Estonia. This is going so fast I can barely read it.
Great.
India, New Jersey, Mexico. This is wild. Wow. Hello from everyone all around the world. This is like, I've never seen such a spread of people from different places before. This is really, really like a diverse group of people. This is super cool. So hi. Wow. Okay, people are already asking their questions. Um, so we won't kick off. I'll give it maybe one more minute. If anyone does have any questions, as you can see, the chat is very busy. So do pop questions in the Q&A instead of in the chat, and then we'll try and get to as many as we possibly can. But yeah, if it's just chat in terms of saying hello, someone says hi from their dog walk, hello. Awesome. So I think we've had a lot of people join already. So let's get started. So hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here today for our Creator Roundtable on lifting off with visionOS. So a bit of housekeeping before we get started. As I just mentioned, if you have any questions, do pop them in the Q&A section. We've got a few members of staff there answering your questions, and we will have some opportunity for live Q&A at the end as well. This talk is being recorded, so fear not if you have to step away for a few moments. It is being recorded and it will be emailed to you because you've signed up, so we'll be able to send it to you. I'll be your moderator today. My name is Antonia Forster. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a senior advocate at Unity, specializing in virtual reality, augmented reality, and spatial computing. So I'm really delighted to be leading the webinar here today. I'd love everyone else to introduce themselves. So maybe Andrew, if you could go first.
Hi, I am Andrew Ike. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the CEO at Alchemy Labs. Alchemy Labs made the games Job Simulator, Vacation Simulator, Rick and Morty Virtual Reality, and Cosmonius High.
Fantastic. Stefan, do you want to go next?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Stefan. I'm the CEO and founder of GoBar. We are a Munich-based XR company, which is exclusively working in the field of extended reality and spatial computing, and we are focused in industrial solution and enterprise solution. Yeah, and great to be here and happy to have me. So thanks for the invitation.
Thanks for coming. Xander, do you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Xander McCarthy. I'm a technical lead here and a part of Unity that assists game developers with directly making games for exciting new technology, exactly like the Vision Pro. Joined Unity last year. I've been in a bunch of the games industry and robotics and web and a bunch of stuff before that. So super excited to be here and be part of this panel.
Fantastic. So those are our main panelists for the sort of roundtable portion. My colleagues Justin and Zane are also here in the Q&A answering questions. So please do pop any questions in there. So today we're going to be talking about a whole range of subjects, including how Alchemy Labs are bringing their popular titles, as mentioned, Job Simulator and Vacation Simulator, over to the fully immersive space on Vision Pro. We'll also be talking about how GoVar and how Unity, working with Boneloaf, approach bringing immersive mixed reality experiences to the Vision Pro, where you can interact with digital content and still see the world at the same time. Now, I did mention there's the Q&A at the end, so we're going to spend about 45 minutes on the roundtable portion. Then we'll have a few minutes, hopefully about 10, 15 minutes at the end for questions. And that's everything. So I'll stop my screen share so that we can see everyone's lovely faces. There we go. And we'll jump in. So I've got a question for you first, Andrew, if that's okay.
That's great.
What inspired you to develop for the Vision Pro in particular?
Yeah, so Alchemy Labs, we are like strongly multi-platform company. So we really are excited to be on new platforms. We're also extremely excited about hand tracking. So the thought of a platform that is shipping exclusively hand tracked and with the power that the Vision Pro has on it, the computing power, was really exciting for us. And it was really exciting to bring our titles to that. We were originally a mobile developer before this. So we have a lot of like iOS experience. And so it was really fun to kind of jump back into that ecosystem. So our expectations here are that, you know, what Apple brings is like an incredible history and knowledge of user experience design. And we are just really excited to be able to kind of contribute to that and bring our titles to that platform.
Perfect. If I can direct a question at you, Xander, can you talk a bit about your new project and your approach to immersive mixed reality experiences that you can sort of experience in the physical world? So sort of what is the project and what was your approach to mixed reality there?
Absolutely. Our project is called Meet Co Test Laboratory. It's a new title made with us in partnership with Bone Loaf, who's the creators of the game Gang Beasts, which is a fun kind of fighting chaotic title. It's available on consoles and Steam. The Bone Loaf folks have created these really wonderful characters in the Gang Beasts universe. They're silly, they're quirky, they're just kind of adorable. They really feel like lifelike toys. And from speaking to the folks at Bone Loaf and really understanding their dream and vision, they really wanted this experience of toys, just like you were growing up and depending on how old you were, the 80s or 90s or whenever, with these little plastic things you could mash together. And we thought, wow, what a cool opportunity to really bring those lifelike toys to life in your living room, to see what would it be like to have them jumping off your couch or diving off the table or something like that. So we really wanted something that really made it feel like you just had these toys in the world, and showcased the wonderful, hilarious, creative characters they already have. We thought the Vision Pro was a great way to do this in terms of the technology of being able to blend virtual and digital content. The natural kind of intuitive interface of reaching out and touching something. That's exactly what you do with toys on your living room floor. And we just wanted to make something like simple, joyful, not a 20-hour long saga, but just something just like toys. You pick them up, you have your own fun. I think it came out really well.
I really like that idea of sort of physical toys and physical space and spatial interaction, because I think that's something that's really special about XR, is that you have that sense of sort of being in the real world. So that makes a lot of sense in terms of like how toys translate into digital. You're not really bounded by a monitor. They can kind of be around you. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly
It's
right.
very insightful. Stefan, do you mind elaborating on your latest mixed reality app that you developed?
Yeah, of course. So we are currently developing a couple of XR applications, but the one I think for the AVP is now relevant. So we are developing two AVP applications. One is like a fitness app, which is really tailored on the Vision Pro, and the other one is like for a German car manufacturer, the enterprise solution, where we just show the new release of the cars. So the initial development was done for the iOS. Was an iOS application. So we did like two applications, one remote control and one viewer and recorder app, where we have like the AR content implemented. Now we have the migration onto visionOS, and we're developing this during the couple of months. And it's now a hands-free, way more immersive experience with the Vision Pro than having like the limited field of view of an iPhone or of an iPad. So it's really great to have that solution now here in that performance and the quality. So great.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. Kind of in the same way that, I mean, obviously very different, automotive being very different field to like toys, but in the same way you get that sense of presence and physicality of having that thing in front of you instead of having it on, just a mobile device held in front of you. So yeah, I definitely think that's one of the huge benefits of mixed reality in general.
Yes.
So what were your expectations and goals for building for Apple Vision Pro? Andrew, do you mind taking that one?
Yeah, so I think that what we want to do is show a full, complete, fully immersive game, right, on the headset, right? And I think there's a lot of wonderful, wonderful apps that people are bringing over, and the device really, really excels at that. But our unique kind of capability that we have is that we can port to many things, and we built up this library of knowledge with hand tracking. So we really wanted to show the immersive capabilities of the headset, and we were really excited to kind of see how our games looked and felt in that headset.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Alchemy Labs games, I have to admit. I used to work in hand tracking before I came into Unity, so I specifically, sorry?
I think we have two extra fans right here on the screen. So
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, big fan. And in particular, the kind of interactions and the way it uses space and the fact that, you know, things are very diegetic, they exist in the world. I've always thought that's like a really big, you know, part of alchemy. It's really playful and really fun, the interactions. So yeah, I can really see the benefit of having that on a headset and having that hand tracking. I think that's
and I think just to kind of like say one of the other benefits we get from Vision Pro, right, is that by default, it's in a mixed reality mode, right? The spatial mode. And that sets the user expectation of like a limited amount of locomotion, right? All the content comes to you. You don't really go to the content. And so our games in particular do really well with that. We have extremely limited locomotion, right? And in VR, in the fully immersive side, you know, in many games, exploration involves going somewhere and looking for something. But in VR, exploration is really like you're in front of someone's desk and you're digging through their drawers and you're trying to figure out, what is this like widget I found? How does it work? You know, I remember as a kid, like finding my dad's old like record static thing. And it was like the coolest thing I ever found. Right. And that's like a thing that is so unique to VR that doesn't exist, or spatial in general, that doesn't exist on anything else. And so that's one of the big things that Alchemy pushes in general. I think the Vision Pro really helps us with that.
Yeah. For anyone in the chat who hasn't tried either Job Simulator, Vacation Simulator, or Virtual Reality, or Cosmonious High, I think that's true for all of them. Like in Job Simulator, you're at a desk, right? And like you're not
Literally,
physically
yes,
moving around a lot, but you've got all this narrative exploration. So yeah, anyone who's in the chat, I'd urge you to go find those and play those. So I'm quite curious about what your biggest challenges were in the process. If I can maybe pass it on to Stefan, like what kind of challenges did you find and how did you overcome them?
So for us, of course, the biggest challenge in the beginning was like the development more or less in the dark, because we were like really migrating like the iOS solution for the visionOS and interpreting like all the UX from the device into like the Vision Pro. And then, of course, as we are based in Munich, Germany, there is like there it's not gonna sold yet officially in the in Germany, but it will come for sure. But that was also like a pretty challenge for us, and also translating all like the level of detail like we have on the iOS version of the car and the quality to translate that into like the new visionOS system was also like a challenge for the whole team. But they were super curious and excited to go that path and create this application then for this new great class.
It's sort of a different paradigm in certain ways, right? It's like you've got to kind of
Absolutely.
I think that's always true in the kind of spatial computing or mixed reality space. Is it's always changing, right? So it's I think as long as you stay curious and you're kind of interested in how to kind of best manifest the things that you can visualize, I think you can always find a way forward. Andrew, are you happy to speak at all to sort of challenges and overcoming?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, and this is more a recommendation for developers, is whenever you're working on a new platform, right? We're talking about 3 players here, all of whom are trying to build something up, right? And so, you know, we have Apple, who's obviously trying to create the hardware and the software that goes with it, and then Unity, who's trying to interface with that software, and then us, who's trying to interface with Unity and Apple, right? And so one of the best things as a developer that you could do is be communicative with Unity on the forums, right? We were pretty notoriously all over the forums for the Apple Vision stuff, and still are. And then so going forward, right, it's we talk with Unity as best we can to try to say, where we're going. And so like sometimes, we have to, sometimes we get great traction, and sometimes we have to kind of like do a workaround. So a workaround example is, right, we don't have the exact spatialization that we're like really hoping for, but you can recompile the Resonance SDK, which is an SDK that exists. And we did that. And so our games are running this like Resonance SDK that we compiled from scratch for the Vision to make sure that we have spatialization, because it's so important, right? So it's kind of a push and pull. Everyone has a limited amount of time and a limited amount of bandwidth to do everything, and it's really a like team effort to discuss where we need to account for things, where Apple can do things, and where Unity can step in and help. And kind of all of that together is the biggest challenge.
Yeah, the coordination
Absolutely.
of sort of multiple parties. Yeah, I speak. Do you agree, Stefan? Sort of nodding.
No, I just want to agree on that the community really helped us, and just if you put like the question out on it, or even like the support from Unity and also the community itself, it was like really helpful for really do the swarm technique and really try to get the informations together. So that was
Definitely.
really
So I guess
great.
that's sort of a tip as well, is like the discussions forums are really, really helpful. So anyone encountering any sort of with any questions at all, really, like there's a really good place to go. Xander, I haven't really called on you at all. I feel bad. So
Sure thing.
what kind of tips would you give a new visionOS developer to get started?
Especially if you're a new visionOS developer, maybe you have some existing Unity experience, I think one of the biggest things I would think about is your workflow. So you always want to be able to iterate quickly, especially when you're experimenting with like new ideas on a new platform. And one of the really nice things about working with visionOS is you can either be developing in Unity like you're used to, just pop into play mode in the editor, or you can be working with Apple's really excellent visionOS simulator, which I'm lying a little bit, but allows you to pretty much test the full like graphical capabilities of the device. But it's a simulator on your computer, which is limited to, let's say, mouse and keyboard input. And then there's the device itself, which is going to let you experience the full richness of spatial interactions. It's going to let you do on-device performance testing. But at least if you're in a country in Europe, they may be a little hard to get your hands on at this point in time. Even if you have one, there's going to be a cost side to that. Even if that's not an issue, it's just a new device that you might not be used to working with. So we were quite thoughtful about like, if you can just, for some game features, be iterating in the editor, pop in, pop out, live change properties, that's amazing. If not, the simulator is a really excellent tool. Unity's visionOS support includes a play to device feature, which also allows you to deploy either directly to a device or to a simulator. So you can, again, kind of shorten that iteration loop. So just overall being really thoughtful about what level of like deployment to the hardware you need to be able to do your job, focusing on kind of the minimum that lets you work the fastest for your idea, but also not compromising. Like if you need to test those hand interactions, go to the device. It's wonderful.
Yeah, perfect. I think that's I mean, I love play to device. I'm a big fan. I've always wanted something like this. So the fact that you can kind of
It's pretty cool.
anything that speeds up iteration, I think in spatial computing or mixed reality or virtual reality is such a blessing. Or just in general, any app development, it's quick iteration is just going to save so much time and allow you to just develop so much faster. So yeah, I'd agree with that. Sort of build out your MVP, iterate quick, and there are tools to help with that, which is amazing. And the simulator is fantastic.
Totally.
Like I built the simulator a lot. I do have a device now, but before I had one, I was using the simulator a lot more. Stefan, do you have any tips for visionOS developers getting started?
So yes, I would say I totally agree on that. So really trial and error with the simulator, and then once it comes to really like the secret sauce in the spatial computing and thing, then it's really helpful that you use the class, especially when it comes to spatial audio or really to hand interactions and to the depth view to really get a feeling of getting the space, the physical space into your application as well. So this is like a tip I would say, which really helps to then really go into the details to see where the details and the magic is coming in the end for your application. So this helps a lot to then iterate the last line with the device, if possible, of course.
Yeah, definitely. Nothing compares to having it like in device, in location, kind of experiencing it for real. Yeah, definitely. So in terms of UI UX, one thing I often find from people who are new to developing for spatial computing or for mixed reality or virtual reality is that UI and UX, user interfaces and user experience, are a bit different to developing for a 2D monitor. So how does your approach to UI and UX for visionOS compare to other platforms? Andrew, do you want to take in that one? Very curious to hear you.
Absolutely. So one of the big things I think is that Apple did a wonderful job with their pinch gesture. But the pinch gesture, we have to remember, is a binary selection gesture, right? It is, I am clicking a button. It is, I am, pinching and dragging on a 2D screen, right? And we've experimented with similar gestures internally at Alchemy and found that wonderful self-haptic and everything works great. But let me give everyone a bit of advice from doing XR for a long time, from doing spatial for a long time. And that is, the pinch gesture is not a proxy for grab. It's not a proxy for many things. The proxy for grab is grab, right? You have spatial computing, we're not here. We shouldn't be abstracting every layer away from interaction. We should be embracing many of these layers, right? A lot of what Alchemy does as development is we end up doing kind of half of it is UX, but our half of it is really product design and physical product design. And when we go through the UX process, one of the big things we have to do is like, we have this saying where like, it doesn't count unless you've touched it, right? None of the UX design counts unless you actually physically have it. So your traditional, wireframe process, if you're building a spatialized 2D app, stick to that. I think that's great. But if you're gonna jump into 3D, you really need to start thinking about it much more like an ergonomic product design and much more like what is the physicality of it. And that is like a big jump that we have with folks at UX, is to really get them into that, right? Like, it's okay to have pinch buttons, but it's also okay to have physical buttons, right? Throwing is something that feels great in XR. And I do know that like polyspatial supports the physics, right? So you could technically throw something and have it fly away. And picking things up feels great. Even without, any type of controller, like it feels really good to do this and do that. So my big thing here, right, is like know when the kind of abstracted design is useful, and know when that diegetic, that touch and feel and grab and poke is useful. And both of them are incredibly powerful when combined. But don't, like, I've seen apps where like it's like, oh, I'm spinning this house, and you're like doing 2 fingers, and it's like, why can't I just grab a tray and spin the house, right? Or, I'm picking something up and moving it, and I'm doing this, and it's like, just pick it up and move it. It's right in front of you, right?
And it speaks a bit to like the application being kind of culturally, I guess, accessible to all people, because if something has a visual affordance like a handle, everyone kind of goes to grab it and interact with it, and you don't really need to like explain that with text. You don't need to translate that into other languages. It transcends ages, boundaries, and experience with these devices. It's kind of just quite a natural interaction. So
yeah, we do a book club at Alchemy Labs, and the first book that was part of the book club was The Design of Everyday Things, which is like that is like your, I don't know, constitution or whatever you want to call it, right? That is the book, right? Because it's about the more design of the physical world than what we've done with like flat UX. So yeah, I strongly recommend that. Actually, my number one UX recommendation is read The Design of Everyday Things. It's a wonderful book. It will teach you more about life, and it will break your brain forever. You'll be mad at things, and not be mad at yourself anymore. You'll be like, oh, I can't open this. And then you're like, it's not my fault. It's the designer's fault. So
like bad door, right? Push-pull door handles.
Yeah, the Norman
right?
doors.
That's a classic
right?
example.
Yeah.
Like,
The Norman doors are classic.
I've read it, so I know exactly what you took. So yeah, I also recommend that book. I think it's fantastic. So in terms of like learning, development, changing process, things like that, and evolution, I'm curious how, for the panel, how your workflow changed as you developed your visionOS project. So, Sandra, are you happy to speak to that? Did you kind of form your own best practices? What were some of those? How did that kind of change as you went?
So I think the main thing that I tried to hold true on our team as we were developing was that we didn't have any fixed process because the landscape was changing. So we started working on, our goal, and we succeeded at this, was to make this game available on launch day, which means we were working on it before everything was launched, which means we were working on it before Polyspatial's 1.0 release came out. We were working on it through various visionOS preview updates. We were working on it with different levels of, device access or various things. So we had to adopt different processes for where we were in the timeline. We started out kind of very editor heavy, not having things like heavy traditional QA approaches because we weren't building the final experience. As we got kind of further and further to something we were actually not only ready to ship to users internally, but when the launch date was coming up, we were starting to get much more focused on, okay, have we tested everything not only in simulator, but on device? How does it feel with your hands? We started to do a lot of that kind of like fine-tuning, polishing. And a lot of that kind of felt very similar to traditional game development, where you started in kind of like a white or gray box, sort of scoping things out, getting the rough shape and feel, then getting like the functionality locked in, really tuned, and finally getting like the visuals and the look and feel in the kind of last 10%. A thing that was actually really nice was at the end when we were trying to make those tricky trade-offs between like, is the game done and are we going to ship it and have it be stable versus, oh, it would be so cool, was adding these tiny, tiny little details that in a normal game, you have kind of a fixed depth of camera zoom you can sort of achieve. Like the tiny
Mm.
details are tiny. With the Vision Pro, you can get right up close and see. Like we have these little computer monitors in the screen. There's fake little code that's running down as the beasts are doing their thing. That it's just so magical to see it in person. So going through that early kind of gray boxy, working with the constraints we have, becoming more formal as polyspatial stabilized, as Apple stabilized, as more development availability came there, kind of a traditional flow, I guess.
Yeah, that's a very sensible approach, I think. And I think that goes for any kind of emergent technology or new platform, is like things stabilize over time. So kind of fleshing out your MVP and, as you said, gray boxing at the beginning and then nailing down those kind of finer details towards the end. It makes it's kind of a quite a flexible process. It allows you to work with the platform and work with kind of what's there, what's stable, and what's more experimental.
You're
So
actually
that being
inspiring me
true for sort of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say one more thing. A lesson I learned in a previous life was something about like budgeting your risk. So with a new
Mm.
platform, especially, there's a whole lot of different things that you could do because there's a whole lot of things that people just haven't figured out yet because this is new territory. And some of those things you might have great ideas that work out great, and some of them you might have great ideas that they were great ideas, but they actually didn't work out the way you expected, and that's okay. But when you're planning a project, a thing that I think we took on very heavily is we'll pick a couple of things where we don't know exactly how this is going to go, and we know it could go great. And that's where, if things don't go great, our project's in trouble. And then we budgeted, okay, these other areas of our development, we're going to do kind of the tried and true so that we can afford more like this part of the schedule, easy, locked in. Let's spend more time learning and experimenting and trying to find the really cool things here. So we avoided the, I would say, common mistake of let's reinvent everything. We both need to come up with a really cool new interaction paradigm and write our own rendering engine. Like we picked a couple of battles that I think were really good, and the rest we bought ourselves some time.
I'm going to jump in there and say this might be the best advice you get on this call, because at Alchemy we don't take more than 2 on any project, and you can watch every single project, right, and look and say like, oh, they did, like job simulator, vacation simulator was like, oh, we did like interacting with the bots with waves, and we did teleportation, right? That was the big risk. So like, yeah, it's okay to make the thing that you're good at, and then to pick up to 2, no more than 2 very unknown areas. But yes, that's the best advice you can give.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice, Sander. Like, I like also thinking it as a budget, I think is really nice. I would have never thought to frame it that way, but budgeting that risk and saying, we can afford to take this risk, but, we definitely need some of this non-risk, like we can't afford too much. So yeah, really, really good advice there. So how was developing for visionOS different from building for other spatial computing or mixed reality platforms? Xander, can I go to you again for that one? And then...
Sure. For visionOS and for the Vision Pro in particular, the way I think of it, the thing that's kind of obvious in terms of how an app is so different from other experiences is really this focus on hands. And in particular with the OS interactions, it's this very, very classic Apple way, this very simple, this very clean, very intuitive is a tricky word, but sort of like very intuitive interaction with the real world. Gang Beasts, which is the main game that Bone Loaf makes on a different platform, it's centered around this really cool, really fun dual joystick controller experience, which is a very different, let's say, aesthetic than the kind of Apple classic. So really just focusing on what are the strengths of the platform, what really makes this platform unique, and kind of designing to complement that. That was, I think, the main thing we wanted to do to make the Vision Pro. We wanted to make a Vision Pro app that felt like a Vision Pro app rather than, okay, you can take your other hardware and do the same thing and bring your own controller or something. That wasn't what we were looking for.
Yeah, that makes sense. Obviously, it has, for anyone who's not familiar, the Apple Vision Pro does not have controllers. So there's very much a focus on hands, but it also does, as you said, there's this kind of unique kind of experience or taste or feel.
Sure.
So yeah, it does feel quite distinctive.
I do also want to just clarify, the Vision Pro does support Bluetooth controllers. And if you have a game, like I'm imagining like a Mech Warrior thing or something with like really complicated, and that's the beauty and the sauce, it'll work, go for it. We just made the aesthetic choice that we wanted to, let's say, like feel Apple-y of just one more thing. Look how clean. That was what we were going for.
Andrew, any thoughts on sort of developing for visionOS, the Apple Vision Pro being sort of different from building for other mixed reality platforms?
Yeah, so we when we build for other mixed reality platforms, right, we're typically building for low power devices. So it was really nice to have the extra headroom with the lovely like the M2 and reality processor. I think those are like, it just took it let us take a deep breath with you know, our current games. This was like, oh, okay, we can focus on the normal kind of platform problems you run into and less the like the fight to optimize. And like there's some wild optimizations left over from previous, you know, bringing Vacation Simulator over, right? There's animations that are hidden in shaders. We turn on and off objects and all this stuff. So when we bring it over, it's like, wow, it runs wonderfully. And like the displays are beautiful and amazing. And yeah, that the hand tracking is like, it's always fun to do hand tracking. I have so many good stories about people where controllers are very confusing to them because they didn't grow up with that. And you know, even if you look at the maximum number of console players in general, it's still like is extremely low in comparison to the amount of cell phone users. So people love that natural user interface, and it's really kind of key. So all of that's great. And it's lovely to work with hardware that just like not just supports, but like has really, really embraced hands. So
Yeah, I think that's good fun. There's definitely something, I guess, visceral about interacting with hand tracking. Like I'm a big fan, maybe biased because I used to work in specifically that area, but yeah, I'm a big fan of kind of
I think it's one of those things where you're shocked about how like how much goes into the hand tracking. You would think like without the controllers, I'm missing like some of these binary inputs and the feel and the heft of the controller, but there's a bunch of things you can do. We don't have this in our current games. So we did show a demo at GDC a few years ago. One of the cool things you do with hand tracking is like what we call secondary interactions, right? So you have a bottle of something and you squeeze it, right? And you have variable squeeze, or you have like pick something up and use a trigger and a thumb and have that feel really good in a completely different way from just like grabbing it and using the trigger with a controller. So yeah, it's something about hands. People know how to use them. And so you're just like using all their current knowledge and just getting all of that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, from birth, the first thing you sort of do to interact with the world, right, is you reach out with your hands, you reach out and grab stuff. So it's just this very universal cultural experience, I think, that you can rely on. People have already existing knowledge, existing expectations around it, and you can kind of either leverage that or surprise them. I tried the Alchemy Labs hand tracking demo and then one of the things I really enjoyed is there's I think it's like a cola squirty vending gun thing.
It's like
and
a
so you
soda
can
jerk
kind
gun.
of yeah, you hold it like this and then you can do this to squirt. And I was like, I've never actually done a hand tracking interaction like that before, where there's kind of an existing mechanism and then an additional button. I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense. That's how I'd expect it to work. There was no explanation. It just was intuitive. Like that's how that works. You know, that makes sense. It's physically how it would work.
And I think if as a developer, if you can really embrace hand tracking and really, I know there's a lot of that, you know, I know Unity has an interaction framework that does many of the similar things. Like we have our own, right? But Unity has one that will get you a lot of the way there. If you can embrace hand tracking and stop trying to think of it as a proxy for some other device, right? And just be like, what makes a great hand tracking game? If you're making a gun game, I can't help you. But if you're making any other kind of game,
this is finger guns.
Yeah, there is a finger gun game, but anyway, if you're making any other kind of game, like you could really, really benefit from just like fully embracing hand tracking and just accepting it as the de facto standard.
Yeah, the toolkit I think you're referring to is the XR interaction toolkit, where there's lots of kind of different interactions. There's also the XR hands demo, which is great. There's loads of kind of more complex hand tracking interactions in there. So there's a couple of different packages and frameworks that people can use. So, you know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel and kind of roll your own from the ground up. Obviously you can, but you can use, I am a big fan of the XR interaction toolkit. And that works on visionOS as well. So Unity have kind of put the effort in to make sure that that does work on this new platform. So highly recommend checking that out. So I'll turn to Stefan. I haven't asked you in a while. What surprised you the most about working with visionOS support? What did you not expect?
For me, it was really good to have the support of the whole team. So you always get some experts like of whether it was the hardware, visionOS, ARKit. So it was always like straight, direct feedback, and you got really also answers for a couple of questions which were popping up. So that was really good to have that, of course. So that really helped us, and I was really surprised to really have that on-point answers for our really specific niche questions. But I was really was really surprised to have that. So as said, we also working since 12 years on applications and XR. And it's most of the time you just like try to solve it by yourself. But this was really a nice support.
Were your questions more around sort of like technical specific, like getting a specific feature or shader or something to work? Were they more kind of around interactions? Or I'm kind of curious if you can speak to that.
So it was also UX wise. So like the whole new UX, bringing that also into it. So like what you said, like the hand tracking, and now with the combined with the eye tracking, I really love that approach, and I'm really curious to see what people develop in that combination, because this is like the God mode, just like looking on that and just like tapping that. I think this is really a powerful UX tool we all got into our hands to really do and develop great applications on with that UX interaction. So it's really natively what you said, it's really natively human interactions integrated, but on top you have like that God mode, like just like gazing at like the Gogo Gadgetto arm once you want to grab stuff from which is far away. So I really like that.
Yeah, I love that you call it God mode. It's super comfortable. I agree. It's like you look at something and then, you pinch your hands down by your side. You don't even lift it up. You just pinch and, you can type on a keyboard quite comfortably and things like that, which is, usually a huge challenge in XR. So yeah, totally agree with you there. And Xander, what surprised you about working with visionOS support?
I think the biggest surprises came up when I actually was able to experience our application on a headset for the first time. I think the first thing that really impressed me was the combination of how Unity's existing rendering system works, as well as how rendering happens in mixed reality on the Vision Pro. So my understanding of how it works, and I'm not an expert in all the implementation details here, is with visionOS support from Unity, instead of using Unity's full traditional rendering engine, the renderable information like meshes and textures and shaders and so on are sent over to the headset, but then the visionOS operating system, the visionOS system, takes over from there and renders your mixed reality content in the world with the full pass-through video that's being updated as you're moving your head. If you're operating in the shared space alongside other apps, all the other apps are being rendered at the same time. So one of the first questions we had when getting a device was like, okay, what can this thing handle? How many things can we render on screen? And we did a great job with our first prototypes of throwing too much at the device. But I was shocked that the rendering itself was fantastic. So the way the application works roughly is, as an operating system, visionOS says, okay, each application can have a little bit of power that it can use to run your application. And that's going to be limited to keep all the other apps running safely. But the rendering, because that's done by the operating system, that's completely separate. So your app might be running slowly because you're overloading it, which means that from a Unity perspective, your frame times are going to go up, your updates are going to be called less frequently. But the rendering still being handled by the operating system. You could see our characters animating at a janky like 1 FPS sort of thing. And as your head was moving, it was buttery smooth. And you didn't have that sort of nausea you get in a lot of other systems where when your system slows down, you turn your head and you get that delayed update, gone. So that was the first, I was just not expecting that, which gave me a lot of comfort in terms of what Andrew was saying about the stress of optimization. Not only is the platform very capable, but you don't have the same physical discomfort threat if your performance goes down on your app a little bit compared to some other platforms where your app is also what's doing the render. The other thing I would just want to say is the quality of the pass-through, again, just like so good, which was very apparent very quickly. But where I really noticed it was when I was working and I had the headset on, and for some reason I had to reboot it. And I turned it off to reboot it, and I could no longer see my colleague sitting in front of me. And I was like, wait, what? Oh, it's a camera, right? Oh, yeah, that's how it should work. Which the fact that I forgot that was just, it actually made me really excited.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I actually had a very similar experience. I switched it off. Oh, I think around a battery, switched it off. I can't remember. And I was just like, what's happened? Like the lights have gone off.
Well, I don't understand how this could possibly. Totally.
It's like I
It's
can't
really
remember.
impressive.
Like it's kind of disconcerting. Definitely agree with you there. And that's a really good point about the rendering. So in the mixed reality space, if you're developing a mixed reality application that is using the pass-through cameras, the rendering is handled by Reality Kit on the device. And then the kind of game physics, game logic is handled by Unity, and Unity's technology polyspatial is what's enabling that. So that takes the information from your Unity application and it passes the relevant information to Reality Kit saying, render this mesh, assign this texture to this material. And then that's handled in that way. So, shaders built with shader graph are converted to this Material X open standard, not to get too into the weeds about it. And then, yeah, so you're absolutely right. I hadn't thought about the implications for that on kind of much more, very high poly experiences and things like that. But you're right. It means that in the mixed reality space, you don't have that threat of like that visual tearing because the rendering is not even being handled by your application really. So yeah, super interesting point. One question I really want to ask you, Andrew, and I know this is like a 1 hour question and we have like 3 minutes, so I'm sorry, but I really want to ask you, how do you see XR changing? And in particular, like how do you see the impact of the Apple Vision Pro, and how is Apple Vision Pro kind of redefining and changing the XR or spatial computing space?
I'll do my best. Here we go. So I think the Apple Vision Pro is like heralding the era of general computing. And so if you think about the history of computing, right, all the way back, a lot of people's experience with computing was either in these giant mainframe systems that they accessed at work, or it was, when you're talking about home computing, actually like video game consoles, right? And to date, that's a lot of where spatial has spent its time, in these kind of custom built video game centered devices. And you think about the Atari as many people's like first actual home computer, right? Or there's Commodore 64, right? When we start talking about spatial, right, we've been kind of stuck in that, and this represents like what Apple has built represents the first real like honest take at what does a general computing device look like, and what does it mean to be doing general computing in spatial, right? And I think that you're also starting to see people use it. And yeah, it's a first generation, in many ways, it's a first generation device. You might think of it as this device that has spanned, and it's like there's all these other devices, and this is just the most modern iteration, the most modern version of that. But we kind of think of it as a first, right? This is the first general computing. This is, the Apple II or the PC coming home, and you can finally play the Oregon Trail and do VisiCalc, right? And do that kind of both sides of things. And I think the other big thing is, and I'll try to wrap it up, is like we see spatial as a spectrum, right? There is no MR, AR, VR. It doesn't exist, right? What exists is a spectrum in the same way that exists in general computing. And when you're talking about that, you're talking about the fact that some apps exist as windows, right? I'm looking at a screen right now that has tons of windows. Some apps, when you play games, go full screen, and some do the broad spectrum of in between those two. And that's what you're going to see. And so the developers that are really going to succeed in this are the ones that really embrace spatial and look at it as that spectrum. What does my app look like when it's running next to other apps? What does it look like when it's running in a larger format, but still in a spatial mode? And what does it look like when it takes the entire interactive space, and how do each of those work together, right? And thinking about it in that spectrum is really the way to go. And so this is like a jump in the era of general computing. And so that's like, again, I could go on for hours about this. I think that that's why you see hand tracking. That's why you see eye tracking. That's why you see the powerful processor. That's why like their Windows system lets you pop up as many windows as you want, lets you place them where you want, lets you do all these things. And that's why there's such a focus on making sure that these like iPad and similar apps make it over, because we want you to be able to be all powerful in this. And then when you want to play a game, you go full screen, full immersive, and then or partial immersive, and it all works out.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's not only kind of a spatial computing or mixed reality device that is cross industry. So obviously, even on a panel today, like we're talking about gaming applications, industry, different industries as well. So, but it's not only that, it's, because of this shared space where you can have windows and volumes that you're interacting with, you can have mixed reality widgets as well as watching a movie. And then you can switch over to a kind of fully immersive application. So that could be mixed reality where you can use pass-through and there's content all around your environment, or it could be a kind of more virtual reality, fully immersive, where you can't see the world anymore. There's no pass through, and you're in this virtual digital space, like as the Alchemy Labs games are. It's, as you said, much more general computing device. It's not just a games console. It's not just, it's like a new kind of era of, I guess, this term spatial
And
computing.
to be honest, this is what I feel like all of us have been waiting for, who've been in this community for a long time.
Absolutely.
We've been dying for the general computing device, because this is where the real mainstream push happens.
And it's super exciting for all of us in the space, right? Like, it gets more people into the space as well. More users means more applications, means more demand. It's just good for everyone. So yeah, I'm super excited about it as well. So that brings us to, I think, time for our Q&A. Thank you for, I mean, I would love to talk about this with you for an hour, Andrew. So maybe we'll
talk for hours on that. So
yeah.
I would love that. But yeah, we do have time for a Q&A, I'm really happy to say. So we can have participants kind of sharing their questions. My colleagues Justin and Zane are here to answer any Unity related questions that you have as well. So I think we're gonna, hi Justin, hopefully Zane will come on in a second as well. No pressure though. Yeah, so we're going to be picking questions out. If you guys want to be selecting, or if someone else wants to be selecting the questions, we've got a huge number of questions in the Q&A, which is amazing. I think a lot of them have been answered throughout, which is great. So yeah, I can see some of them are being nominated to answer live, I think. So this is a great question. Someone's asked, I wonder how some of you creators are handling custom gesture recognition. Would love to hear some suggestions on that. So who's happy to speak to that? I mean, I guess, Andrew, it makes sense because
I was about to say, I think we're the
fully
custom
immersive,
gesture
so you've got,
recognition, fully immersive folks. So they do have a hand model. We do have to always do some cleanup. No hand model is perfect, right? Things happen. Like, a good example is like you're picking something up and the hand tracking stops and it resumes, right? And Unity moves an object at like 3,000 meters a second, and everything in your hand shatters and explodes, and it's bad. So we do a lot of like kind of accounting and adjusting for that. And there's no hand tracking system that exists that does it perfectly. So we are always like working on that. But the best thing to do is to get the full hand model, and then we just adjust. I built a pose thing. Unity has a pose tool. I know this, right? We never used it because we built our own, which is why Alchemy is always the bad example. But Unity has a pose tool that will let you get all the values of every joint and use that to help define your poses and help figure that out. And what you're trying to do is set boundaries. So it's out there, and our hosts have helped make something that can help you do that. And then at that, you're grabbing in the actual hand input that's provided by Apple.
So another question, well, Xander or Stefan, do you want to speak to that? Or because yours is a mixed reality applications, is that less kind of applicable?
I think Andrew is the perfect expert for it.
Great.
Sorry.
For us, custom hand gestures was a great example of one of the things we decided to not invest our risk budget in. So I think, yeah, Andrew's answer is fantastic.
Perfect. Okay. So on the subject of interactions, someone's asked, what is the best way to handle hover states for Apple Vision Pro for a VR experience, fully immersive experience? So again, Andrew, this one's going to go to you, being about a fully immersive experience.
I missed in the intro.
So the question was, what is any suggestion in terms of handling hover states for Apple Vision Pro? So is that something you use, a kind of showing that you're about to interact with something? Do you have hover states?
I mean, we built a custom hover states, right? It depends on your application, right? So it's like in a fully immersive application, right? Apple has provided the hover state, which is like you're looking at something, right? And you can grab that data, right, when you look and pinch. But for us, we just built hover states. There's a million shaders out there and a million ways you could do outlines. There's probably more ways you could do outlines than there are ways you could build a game. And so we use a yellow outline typically to indicate that you're about to pick something up. And so that's normally how we work for selection. But again, you have to remember our design is extremely diegetic. So, Xander might have a different answer for like using 3D objects where you're using the Apple system.
So in terms of the mixed reality approach, I would have to double check the Apple documentation here, but especially when you're in the real world space, Apple makes sure that they're erring on the side of user privacy and doesn't always give you full tracking information on where the user's eyes are pointing at any given time. So if you have looked at something and do the look and tap, pinch to select sort of gesture, then you get the information of the eyes at that point. But until you do that interaction, there's no, I guess, even after you do, there's no direct like notification that happens at that point. So the classic way that I think RealityKit supports this hover mode in mixed reality is ahead of time you provide, I'm lying a little bit about the details here, but it's something like a secondary shader that, oh, when the user hovers on this, we won't tell you when it happens, but when it happens, here's how to render it. Now, I believe the current status in polyspatial is that there's kind of a default hover effect that's hooked up that you put it on certain objects and it'll just happen. Yes. I think customization of that is a feature that might show up in polyspatial in the future, but currently that's, you say which objects will get this hover effect. The effect is kind of canned and handled for you. It's quite classy. It looks quite nice.
Yes, yes. So that is true. So if you're using Unity Polyspatial to develop for a kind of immersive but not fully immersive app, so mixed reality space essentially, you do get a kind of hover state interaction. Currently, that's not customizable. That may or may not change in future. I'm not privy to that information, but currently that is a kind of default interaction because of leaning towards privacy essentially of data. So in terms of art asset optimization, did your team find that the visionOS was on par with other mobile benchmarks? So developing for, I mean, this person's example is like Apple and Android phones, or is it more limiting or more freeing? Xander, you want to speak to that one?
I'm trying to remember the chipsets on the Vision Pro. I think the primary processor that's available for applications is the M2, which is the same as a high-end MacBook Pro. So I wouldn't so much think of this as a phone. I would more think of it as a computer. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of nuance there in terms of the amount of pixels that are being drawn or whatnot. But at least in our experience, we made a bet that hopefully we wouldn't have to sweat too much about performance, and that bet was absolutely correct. The twist, I would say, is it was less a question of art assets were expensive. It was more that, at least in the mixed reality world, when you're running with polyspatial, which again is a technology that translates Unity rendering features into rendering capabilities on RealityKit, on visionOS, there's that translation layer. Everyone in between has to speak the same language. So there's some features which work pretty darn great. So shaders written in shader graph, the majority of those are supported and look excellent. There are other features that aren't supported. So shaders written, for example, in high-level shader language or any other like customized shader scripts, those aren't supported by default in the intermediary format known as Material X. So there's no way to get that shader information over to the visionOS device. They're not going to be compiled for running on those like metal devices or whatnot. So if you use the large and growing subset of features to make your art assets, they're going to work great. It was more of a compatibility question rather than an optimization or like poly count reduction question, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and it's also true that things like bloom or full screen effects aren't possible in the mixed reality space because there's just no way to achieve that. So those aren't supported. Some things are not supported yet, but maybe in future. Levels of detail, I think some kind of terrain tree features. Shaders written in shader graph are converted to the Material X standard and then converted to RealityKit for rendering. So as you said, I think it's less a computational limitation and more like a conversion, making sure things can be handled by RealityKit in terms of the rendering. And again, this applies specifically to the mixed reality space or for immersive applications, whereas fully immersive applications, so essentially VR or windowed applications, the rendering is handled by the Metal Graphics API. So that would be developed kind of the same as Mac. Stefan, I have a question for you, and then we might have to head into closing. So the application that you developed, is that one that exists in a volume, or is that one that exists in the kind of mixed reality immersive space? So was it within a kind of a cuboid area that you interact with, what's called a bounded volume camera in Unity, or was it a kind of unbounded one?
It's an unbounded one. You just can place the model, the 3D object freely wherever you want to place it, and then just walk around freely and just check and animate and explode the model to the details and the USPs the model has, and then you can just really experience it super detailed, like what Xander said, that it's like you can really have the quality super close in the close-up version. So it's completely walking around freely, and it really sticks super good to the place you place it.
I've got a question about volumes. It's kind of a specific one. So maybe Zane or Justin, you could take this. Is there a chance that volumes can be scaled to larger than 2 by 2 meters, or should you, in that case, go for an unbounded immersive application? Justin?
Yeah, no, the scaling I know that you can do with bounded apps. As far as unbounded apps, though, I honestly I'm not sure. I need to look into that.
Immersive has a limitation on it. If you walk outside 1.5 meters, it will fade out.
If memory serves, and I could be wrong here, as far as mixed reality apps in an unbounded space goes, I don't think there's a strict size limitation. It's more that if you move, then and this, I don't remember if this is also true for immersive apps. I don't think it is. But if you move, you physically walk too far, then graphics kind of temporarily fade out. Again, just as a safety feature, because you don't want to walk into a wall. Otherwise, I don't think there's a direct spatial size limit. I'm not sure if I'm potentially misunderstanding the question though. There's something maybe about like size limit on bounded and unbounded apps. If you're trying, and this is just my, I guess, personal design opinion, if you're trying to make a bounded app that's very large, so something that doesn't extend to infinity, but you're trying to exceed a large space, I would reframe, I guess, the idea of what a bounded app is and use, I think it was Andrew's analogy earlier of this is a general computing device. And the analogy I'm used to is like a desktop with multiple windows on it. Each bounded volume is kind of a window. So you could make a window that has to be very big, but then you're just kind of not playing nice in a multitasking operating system. So I think of like, take the space you need and expect that if you're in this bounded world, you're going to be seen alongside other apps, the user's web browser, the user's Spotify playlist, the user's YouTube video, whatever. And how are you going to fit within that? If your answer is, I'm going to take over the whole screen, maybe that is something that should be an unbounded app rather than a bounded app.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's kind of important at the beginning of that development pathway to decide, like, is this a fully immersive experience, like a kind of more classic VR experience? Do I need the pass-through? If it is, if you've decided that, then you can't kind of later switch on pass-through. So you kind of dedicated to that development pathway. Is this a windowed application, which essentially exists in a virtual monitor? Or is this a mixed reality application? And if so, is that going to exist in a volume so people can use it alongside other things? Or will it kind of take over the space? Once you've decided on that, you can kind of design the rest around it. I think we're basically at time here. So I really want to carry on this conversation and ask a million questions of all of you, but I think it has to be saved for a future session. So all that remains to be said really is to thank everyone for tuning in. I'm really, really happy. This has gone super well. I hope everyone enjoyed it and found it very helpful. If you want to see more technical step-by-step of how to get started developing for the Apple Vision Pro, then we do have an upcoming webinar on March the 5th. So you can scan that QR code to get started, or you can search for Unity, get started developing for Apple Vision Pro. That's going to be much more of a step-by-step in-editor tutorial, how to develop for the device. So how to set up your development environment, configure your settings, and build your first project using the immersive Apple template. In that webinar, the team will demonstrate how to do all the fundamentals of visionOS development and configuration, as well as showing Unity's purpose-built tools and the visionOS support package. So don't miss that. If you had to step away at any point, don't worry, because this talk was recorded, or if you just like to rewatch it, I probably will. This has been really helpful for me as well. So that will be emailed to you within the next few days. Thank you so much to my panelists for a brilliant discussion. It's been very insightful and interesting. Thank you to everyone for joining, and have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you so much and goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.